Subscribe to our YouTube channel and press the bell icon to get the latest updates.
After quite a break, we are looking at Pakistan today. And the big story that we are looking at, I know that you will see headlines as you wake up in the morning, or maybe even now if you track headlines real time on digital media, including ours, especially ours, you will know that new action has been taken against some global designated terrorists. So Lakhvi has been sentenced to 15 years by an anti-terrorism court very quickly, a very quick trial, and also a warrant has been issued for the arrest of Masood Azhar as well, of Jaish-e-Mohammed. So that tells you that both Lashkar-e-Toiba and Jaish-e-Mohammed leaderships are under attack right now, but you can also see that this is timed with the next meeting of the FATF, Financial Action Task Force. So we will talk about this in the course of time, not today, maybe at some other time, because the point we need to understand there is that there is a use and throw pattern to this, as we saw with Osama bin Laden, that as long as he was useful, he was protected, he was also given refuge, he was looked after, and when he had become completely useless to the Pakistani agencies, etc., he was then given up also as a gift to the Americans and to Obama. So we will talk about this in some greater detail later in a standalone Kartak letter. Let us see what happens with Masood Azhar right now. But today we are talking about another aspect of terrorism in Pakistan, and that is terrorism against Pakistan's own people of a particular ethnicity and of a particular sect of Islam. These are the Hazaras, the Hazara tribe, which lives mostly in Balochistan in Pakistan. The larger Hazara population is in Afghanistan, and I will tell you some details of that, because the incident that's just happened on 3rd January or last Saturday, that is a week before this, has now shaken up Pakistan. 11 coal miners of Hazara ethnicity were kidnapped at a place called March. There is a mining village called March, about 51 kilometers from Quetta. They were kidnapped and then they were murdered. This was a mass murder, and this was a sectarian murder. And who claimed the responsibility? IS, that is Islamic State in Pakistan, claimed responsibility, which could be anything. And when Islamic State in Pakistan claims responsibility for something like this, there is a presumption that this has actually been done by one of those well-known Sunni supremacist groups like, say, Lashkar-e-Jhangvi, and we'll tell you about that also. What's happened right now is that people have now got angry. This is 2021. People are aware, and also Hazaras in Pakistan tend to be quite well educated. There are lots of professionals. Lots of them have migrated overseas because of persecution in Pakistan and Afghanistan. So they have a voice. So they are now agitating and they are refusing to bury those bodies. It's now been a week. They are saying they will not bury the bodies unless Imran Khan himself visits them and makes and guarantees, etc., etc., about punishing the guilty. Imran Khan, on the other hand, says that you cannot blackmail me. You first, I will come and see you, but you first bury the bodies, then I will come and see you. So we know about this incident. The Chief Minister of Balochistan, Jam Kamal, he has gone there, but they haven't listened to him. Now, before we tell you a little bit more about who the Hazaras are, we'll tell you about this sectarian issue in Pakistan. Now, it was in 1985, at the peak of General Zia. In fact, it was also the first year I visited Pakistan as a reporter. In 1985, a new organization was set up, and in fact, even when I reached Pakistan and I was talking to people, people told me sort of as a joke that a new Sunni right-wing, Sunni supremacist Deobandi organization has come up under the patronage of General Zia and his own establishment, and it calls itself Anjuman Sipahe-Sahiba, which essentially means the group or conglomeration of the soldiers of the Prophet, except that it had an unfortunate acronym. You can draw it ASS. That was the joke. So Anjuman Sipahe-Sahiba reacted to this and quickly changed its name, and from ASS it became SSP, Sipahe-Sahiba Pakistan. In the course of time, this was banned because this had now begun attacking people, Muslims who they considered apostates or heretics. That is Ahmadiyas, but Ahmadiyas are very few. Shias, and Shias are anything between 10 to 15% of Pakistan. It's a very sensitive issue there because constitutionally, politically, even militarily in Pakistan's military, a Shia-Sunni distinction is not made, because if they did that, then that country will be in deep trouble. Now we know that these bad guys or bad organizations are like the amoeba. You cannot kill it. You break it, it becomes stew. You may kill one part, another part comes up. So what happened was Anjuman Sepah-e-Saiba became Sepah-e-Saiba Pakistan to get a better acronym for itself. SSP is better than ASS. And then in the course of time, as it came under pressure, it had this amoebic multiplication and created an offshoot. And that offshoot was called Lashkar-e-Jhangvi. Lashkar-e-Jhangvi carried out many assassinations, many killings in Pakistan. In fact, Lashkar-e-Jhangvi was led by a man called Riaz Basra, who carried out attacks on an Iranian diplomat and also many Iranian cadets who were studying at the Pakistan Air Force Academy. So those attacks were carried out by him. He was later killed in an encounter with the security forces. In 2007, Lashkar-e-Jhangvi was also held responsible for the assassination of Benazir Bhutto. And you know, as happens with all these organizations, they all get caught up and they all get involved with the agencies or so-called agencies, ISI within ISI, then Directorate S. It's a very complicated can of worms. So they get caught up because they also become assets of those agencies and the establishment in some way. So 2007, LEJ or Lashkar-e-Jhangvi was held responsible for the assassination of Benazir Bhutto. In 2009, they were also held responsible, remember, for the attack on the Sri Lankan cricket team which had come to play Pakistan in a Pakistani stadium. It is because of that international cricket stayed away from Pakistan for such a long time, and I know many Pakistani friends of ours are very upset that in the ICC lists of the Test team of the decade, T20 team of the decade, ODI team of the decade, Pakistanis have been overlooked. But one of the reasons is that Pakistan has played too little international cricket in this decade, and the group responsible for that are wardis of Lashkar-e-Jhangvi, who are now also suspected widely in Pakistan to have carried out this latest massacre. Also, they may call themselves Islamic State, but there isn't such a difference. They can also get themselves another acronym. In fact, SSP also, Sepah-e-Saiba Pakistan, after it was again banned, because every new proliferation gets banned, and then I told you, gave you the amoeba analogy, it produces one more somewhere else. So SSP again was reborn as Ahle Sunnat wal Jamaat or ASWJ, and then it got caught up with Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan as well. So this is a very complicated situation. In 2011, these forces sent an open letter to Balochistan, to the Hazaras in Balochistan, and they said, all you Shias are not Muslims and you are worthy of killing, and we will come and kill you. And after that, there were many rounds of massacres. I cannot give you an exhaustive list because that will take a long time. But if I read data from, say, Human Rights Commission of Pakistan, which does a brilliant job, frankly, it does a better job than any human rights organization in India, including our National Human Rights Commission, which only talks, does very little lately. HRCP is run by people of great conscience and great spine. I.A. Rahman Saab, Pakistan, the doyen of Pakistani journalism, Asma Jahangir, they've all been involved with this, and they've done brilliant job. So if you look at those reports and other reports and reports from Hazara activists, you can see that in the last 20 years, almost 3,000 Hazaras have been killed just like this, in massacres like this, massacres, suicide attacks, bombings, car bombings, because there is an open season on them issued by the Sunni supremacists, and that is the problem that's gone on. So more than 50 doctors in Karachi at one point. We told you Hazaras are well educated, well qualified, lots of them are professionals. Nearly 50 Hazara doctors in Karachi were assassinated in quick succession. After that, hundreds of Hazara doctors left Pakistan, and now you see large populations of Hazaras in the US, in Australia, in Canada, and many other countries, because it's become a large diaspora. 2013, in 2013, it was a bad year for Shias in Pakistan. Nearly 700 were killed in Pakistan in 2013, and I will list some prominent incidents of that year. So January 13, there was a car bomb attack, 91 were killed. In fact, there was an attack by a suicide bomber, and as people were sort of sorting things out there, another car blew up. So it was a 1-2 punch. They had set it up like that. So nearly 100 people died, 91 immediately. In February the same year, Hazara town, that is where there are two areas, Alamdar Road and Hazara town near Quetta, where most of the Hazaras now live in a ghettoized manner. So there was a bombing in Hazara town. So 110 died immediately, and we don't know how many of the injured might have succumbed later. Then in March, the following month, 2 bombs went off in a Shia mosque in Karachi, killing more than 50. Then June, it is the same bloody year of 2013. June 30 in Hazara town, there was one more attack. Then February 2014 in Quetta, there was a big bomb attack. 84 were killed instantly. Some more of the injured succumbed later. In October 2017, there were 20 killed in a Hazara Shia shrine once again. So this is a big contradiction in Pakistan. The Pakistani establishment, the government, the military, it makes no distinction between Shias and Sunnis. Yes, Ahmadiyas are kept out because of the law and the constitution, and Ahmadiyya cannot take a constitutional position. That's a more complicated issue, but not with the Shias. In fact, not even with the Hazaras. And you know, many people will be surprised to know, because not much is remembered of what happened pre-Google. I keep saying that it was a Hazara general who commanded the Pakistan army in the 65 war against India. Field Marshal Ayub Khan was there, but then he was Chief Martial Law Administrator and President of Pakistan. He was a big boss. His army chief was General Muhammad Musa Khan, who was a Hazara Shia, and I will tell you something interesting about him. He was a Hazara Shia who was the army chief for little over 8 years. He became army chief in 58 after Ayub took over, and continued for more than 8 years. So Pakistan, nobody has to retire, particularly in the army, after 3 years. The current guy also, General Bajwa, has an extension now, a long extension, so he can carry on. This general carried on for more than 8 years. Now, little remarkable thing about him. So you know, I love to digress when I get an opportunity for storytelling, so I'm not letting go of this one. So General Muhammad Musa Khan Hazara, as his full name was, he joined the army as a Jawan, as a mere Jawan. At that level, he was born in 1908. He joined the army as a Jawan at the age a little less than 18, the British army at that point, and he joined a regiment called 4th Hazara Pioneers. So there was a regiment in the name of Hazara. So he joined 4th Hazara Pioneers as a Jawan, rose in the course of time to become a Nayak, that is an NCO, a non-commissioned officer, not a JCO, an NCO, and then passed his exams. So he was obviously a very bright, ambitious person. He passed his exam to join Indian Military Academy in Dehradun to become an officer. So he finished his 2.5-year training and became an officer. In 58, he was Pakistan's army chief. At the age of 50, he was a general, and he wrote an autobiography, which you can check out if you can find it on internet. Interesting autobiography. And what is it titled? No surprises. It's called Jawan to General, Recollections of a Pakistani Soldier. And one more aside, just because we are talking about this, and this is a digression you won't mind. He was an officer or a cadet from the first batch of Indian Military Academy, and he was among the batchmates of who else but Field Marshal SHFJ Manik Shah. So this was an illustrious batch. But remember, Musa Khan was somebody who had risen from Jawan to an officer and to general, who ran his army for more than 8 years. In fact, one of their batchmates also became chief of the Burmese army, but let's not go into so much detail. Now, before I conclude this, I'm sure all of you are curious to know who the Hazaras are. Now, Hazaras are a very distinctive ethnic stock, a little bit Mongoloid. If you look at the pictures of Hazaras, you can tell that they look different, and that doesn't help them, because not only do they have a different sect, which is now under attack from Sunni supremacists in Pakistan, but also they look different. So they get into trouble on both counts, sectarian counts and also ethnic prejudices. So they get attacked. Now, the first mention of the Hazaras, in fact, is not very ancient. The first mention of the word Hazara or Hazara Jat, the area in the center or sort of center south of Afghanistan, the large area from where most of the Hazaras live, it's called Hazara Jat. But the first time the word Hazara Jat was mentioned actually is in Babarnama. And Babar, as you know, was about 500 years ago. So that in history, Babarnama seems to be the first mention of the term Hazara and Hazara Jat, the region where Hazaras come from. Now, Ibn Battuta, who had travelled the same region a couple of hundred years earlier, that is the early 14th century. Remember Ibn Battuta, Gulzar's song from Ishqiya, Ibn Battuta Bagal Mein Juta, is a Moroccan traveller. He does not mention any Hazaras or Hazara Jat. So a presumption is that Hazara came out somehow, it evolved from the Mongol armies or Genghis Khan, Kublai Khan armies concept of a 1,000-strong formation of their armies, what is called a battalion now. And that, so battalion, Hazar Admi, that became Hazara, because obviously they were enrolling a lot of people of this tribe into their army. Nevertheless, the Hazara today, if you look at their numbers, in Afghanistan, they are anything between 40 to 50 lakhs. That's a lot of people in Afghanistan, a country of about 3.72 crores. So more than 10%, could be up to 15%. It depends on who's counting, how you are counting. You know how difficult it might have been, if ever, to hold a census in Afghanistan. In Pakistan, there is about 1 million of them, which includes about 50,000 Hazaras who are refugees from Afghanistan into Pakistan. And then you have about 2 lakh in America, quite a few in Australia and elsewhere, because they've now been leaving these countries. Now, if you ask me to find parallels or comparisons for the Hazaras, I would say in a very loose way, the Hazaras are about similar to, say, Kurds or the Armenians, similar both in terms of their geographical location and their issues with where they belong, and also in terms of the cruelty that they have suffered over the, not just the decades, but over the centuries, particularly in the last 120 years or so. So we know the Armenians suffered a great genocide at the hands of the Turks. Hazaras of Afghanistan, Hazara Jat, also suffered a massive massacre, and this is when Abdul Rahman Khan was the ruler of Afghanistan. In fact, all data tells you that nearly half of all the population of Hazaras was killed in that genocide, and of the rest, a lot then migrated to Pakistan, that's mostly to Balochistan areas, and many to Iran in the Mashhad area. So those are the two new populations that came up, but a lot, nearly half were killed, a lot were taken away, a lot of women were taken away, and a lot sent into exile. So they've suffered, and they've suffered since then. If I start counting all the incidents that happened in Afghanistan, it will take forever. But you know, 1933, because Hazaras were angry with the Afghan administration or Afghan rulers, it was a Hazara who assassinated, his name was Abdul Khalik, he assassinated King Nadir Khan. After that, there was one more massacre of the Hazaras, and they were reprisals. And since 1993, again these reprisals attacks have started, because strong Sunni groups have taken over. The Sunni groups dominated the Taliban and Al-Qaeda, and both have been at odds with the Hazaras. History of bombings, massacres in Afghanistan, including Kabul, the massacre at an education center, the massacre at several mosques, massacre at a mourning, massacre at a marriage, at a celebration, they've all involved killing of Hazaras. And these are all suicide bombers of the Sunni right who go and kill Hazaras. So Hazaras have been targeted during Muharram season, Ashura festival, etc. A lot of them get killed almost routinely, and this goes on all the time. In fact, the last major incident of the killing of Hazaras in Afghanistan was in Bamiyan. Remember the place with the old Buddha icons that was destroyed? The last massacre was carried out there when about 20-25 of the Hazaras were killed in bombings. So Hazaras are this unfortunate ethnic group which is once again under pressure now. But this time they've also learned the science of protest, and they are getting media attention, and you have to give compliments to a lot of the media in Pakistan which is covering it aggressively without any fear and quite candidly, and holding the mirror up not just to Imran Khan government but also to the security establishment of their country. Because these relentless attacks on Shias, and in this case specifically Hazara Shias, also question the very basis of Pakistan, that if you wanted a country so Muslims would be safe, what's the point of having it if your own Muslims are not safe within your own country?